The Phantom of Yellowstone Lake. Beneath the mirror-like surface of Yellowstone Lake, something ancient stirs, a presence that doesn't belong in any park guide or ranger manual. The legend begins in the 1870s, just a few years after Yellowstone became the first national park in the world. Early explorers and trappers spoke of a figure who would appear on foggy mornings, a man in weathered Navy attire, soaked to the bone, staring silently across the lake's cold waters. He was first seen near Stevenson Island, drifting aimlessly along the shore as if searching for something lost to time. According to local tales, the Phantom is the spirit of a U.S. Navy sailor who died during a secret mapping expedition gone awry. His boat reportedly capsized during a sudden storm, and his body was never recovered. Some say the government quietly covered up the mission's failure, and that's why his name is absent from official records. But the lake remembers, and so does he. Park visitors have reported unsettling encounters, a dense fog rolling in from the lake with unnatural speed, sudden temperature drops, and an overpowering scent of wet wool and brine. A woman in 1921 claimed she was approached by a man in naval garb who asked, "Have you seen the compass?" before vanishing into the mist. More recently, in 2005, a group of kayakers swore they saw a man standing motionless on the island's edge, even though it's inaccessible by foot. Skeptics suggest misidentified fishermen, low visibility, or hypothermia-induced hallucination. But local park employees, many of whom refuse to work near the lake at dawn, believe otherwise. They say the sailor is still bound to the water, doomed to wander until his mission is complete. Even today, boaters leave offerings on Stevenson Island, coins, medals, small flags to appease the phantom mariner. Whether out of respect or fear, the tradition persists, and on fog-draped mornings, when the lake goes still and the mist swallows sound, some swear they hear footsteps along the shoreline, and a voice whispering through the cold, "Where is the compass?" 2. The Howling in Hayden Valley. There's a place in Yellowstone where the wind doesn't just whistle, it howls, and not all of it sounds natural. Hayden Valley, a sprawling stretch of grassland and thermal flats in the heart of the park, is known today for its wildlife, bison herds, elk, and wolves. But before the National Park Service patrolled its borders, before the roads and overlooks, the valley had another name among local native tribes: the land where spirits hunt. The legend dates back centuries, but written accounts surfaced in the 19th century when a fur trapper named Elias Finch vanished near the banks of the Yellowstone River. His partner claimed Elias had wandered off after dusk, chasing what he thought was a wounded animal. The only trace ever found was a circle of scorched earth, and his shredded coat, no blood, no bones. Eyewitnesses began to speak of a towering figure with the body of a man, but the head of a stag with hollow eyes and antlers that seemed to shimmer with heat. They say it runs silently, except when it stops to scream, a sound so piercing it causes birds to flee and horses to buck. It became known as the Hayden Howler. In 1936, a ranger named Bill Harmon was assigned to monitor wolf activity in the area. His journal, later recovered by his family, described sleepless nights filled with screams from the earth itself. He eventually fled the valley, never returning to Park Service. In the 1970s, a group of hikers claimed they encountered something not quite animal, not quite man, which moved through the thermal fog on two legs, vanishing before they could photograph it. Scientists attribute the sounds to geothermal activity, the shifting of magma and pressurized steam vents. But those who've heard the howler say the noise is different. It echoes with intention. Old park workers still warn against camping overnight in Hayden Valley. The wind doesn't echo there, one said. It answers. And sometimes when the fog hugs the valley floor and the geysers hiss low, you can hear it, not a coyote, not a wolf, but something else howling as if it's hunting in the steam, still hungry for what it lost long ago. 3. The Watcher at Norris Geyser Basin. Steam hisses, mud bubbles, and geysers roar. But sometimes, in Norris Geyser Basin, the strangest thing is silence. This geothermal landscape, the hottest and most volatile in Yellowstone, has long been shrouded in unease. Early Shoshone oral traditions warned that the land breathes here and should not be disturbed. When white explorers arrived in the 1870s, they marveled at the spectacle, but also felt watched. That's when whispers began about the Watcher, a figure that appears only when the basin goes unnaturally quiet. In 1904, a geologist named Arthur Ketteridge went missing near Yellowstone. His equipment was found scattered across the basin, perfectly intact. The only strange item discovered was a series of small footprints, barefoot, human-like, but too narrow and long to match any known species. Park records note only possible geothermal accident, but letters from Arthur's assistant, never published officially, describe something more disturbing. We saw a pale figure standing in the steam. It didn't walk, it hovered, watching. Arthur went toward it. Then he was gone. The Watcher is said to be tall, thin, with gray leathery skin stretched too tightly across its frame. Its eyes are described as pitch black and deep-set, as if sunken into its skull. Some say it's the spirit of someone who ventured too far into the hydrothermal ground and became part of it, a ghost forever tethered to the boiling earth. Over the decades, hikers and rangers have reported brief glimpses, a silhouette in the steam, vanishing when approached. In 1992, a tourist snapped a photo showing what looked like a humanoid shape standing near a steam vent, but the figure cast no shadow. The photo was dismissed as vapor tricks, yet remains a favorite on conspiracy forums. Skeptics blame sulfur hallucinations, heat shimmer, or pareidolia, but those who've seen the Watcher agree on one thing: you feel it before you see it. A sudden drop in temperature, a urge to leave, a presence just behind you. And then, silence. The basin stops breathing. Today, signs warn visitors to stay on boardwalks. For safety, yes, but also, as some rangers quietly admit, because stepping off might attract attention from something that never left, something that's still watching. 4. The Cry of the Petrified Forest. In a quiet, often overlooked corner of Yellowstone, lies the petrified forest, not the living trees you see on postcards, but ancient remnants turned to stone over millions of years. But not everything in this forest is lifeless. The legend begins with a story nearly forgotten: the 1891 disappearance of a prospector named Jedediah Crane. He was last seen heading toward Specimen Ridge, searching for fossilized wood to sell. Locals later found his pickaxe buried in the ground, and carved into a nearby stone, the words, "Et screams at night." Nothing else remained. Over the next several decades, rangers began documenting a strange phenomenon. At nightfall, eerie cries echo across the ridge, not animal calls, something more desperate, like wood moaning under pressure or a person wailing from underground. The sounds became so frequent that workers called the area the Forest of Mourning. Visitors have reported seeing shadowy forms between the petrified trunks, not shadows cast by light, but darkness that seems to move on its own. In 1954, a pair of students camping nearby claimed they awoke to the sound of weeping, followed by the distinct scent of smoke and decay. They described seeing a woman with hair made of ash and limbs like twisted branches walking along the ridge before crumbling into mist. Some believe these figures are the spirits of trees, ancient beings who once stood tall, now frozen in stone and forever grieving. Others claim the forest is cursed, a burial ground for something much older than humans. Scientists have tried to explain the cries as wind passing through rock formations, or shifts in geothermal pressure. But recordings capture something more than wind. Layered voices, a chorus of lamentation. Even today, hikers report strange phenomena. Electronic devices fail, compasses spin, and sleep becomes impossible. Locals advise not to stay too long after dusk. "It doesn't like when you linger," an old ranger once said. The forest remembers, and every so often on moonless nights, Someone hears the same message Jedediah carved over a century ago. A scream that seems to rise from the earth itself, crying out from a forest that cannot forget. 5. The Burning Man of Firehole River. Along the banks of the Firehole River, where hot springs bleed into cold water and steam coils above the surface like breath from the underworld, there's a tale rangers rarely mention unless they've spent too many winters alone. The story begins in 1887, when a man named Thomas Rainier, a traveling preacher from Illinois, came to Yellowstone seeking divine inspiration. Obsessed with fire and purification, he believed the geysers were God's judgment bursting from the earth. He pitched a canvas tent near the Firehole River and began baptizing himself daily in the scalding runoff, chanting verses until his skin blistered. Then he disappeared. His body was never found, but his journal remained half-burned, discovered near the riverbank. One entry read, "The flame speaks. It calls me back to the source. I will walk through the fire and be reborn." Locals chalked it up to madness, but that winter strange sightings began. Travelers on snowy trails swore they saw a man walking barefoot through the steam, cloaked in flame but never consumed. His skin glowed red like embers, and his eyes, if he had any, flickered like coal. He made no sound but left behind scorched footprints in the snow that never melted. They called him the Burning Man. In 1926, a pair of snowshoers reported being followed by a glowing figure near Midway Geyser Basin. They said the air grew hotter as it approached, and one collapsed from heat exhaustion in a snowstorm. Rangers found them the next day, and though temperatures had dropped to zero, the snow around the man's body had melted into perfect circles of mud. Explanations vary: geothermal gases, hallucinations, rare reflections. But the sightings continue. In 1999, a tourist took a thermal image near the Firehole Cascades. One frame shows a humanoid figure, blazing white-hot, standing alone on the river's edge. No one else was visible. Locals say the Burning Man is a spirit of penance, cursed to walk the geothermal veins of the park forever, seeking forgiveness, or perhaps vengeance. Some even claim to hear him whisper scripture when the steam rolls thick over the water. The fire shall try every man's work. Today, rangers warn hikers to avoid the river at night, not just because of thermal hazards, but because sometimes fire walks upright. 6. The Whispers of Obsidian Cliff. High above the park's northwestern corridor stands Obsidian Cliff, a wall of jet-black volcanic glass that once drew native peoples for tools and trade. But long before Yellowstone had roads or tourists, the cliff had another purpose. It was a place of voices. The legend dates back to the early Crow tribes, who called it the mountain that speaks. Shamans claimed the rock could capture words, and not just repeat them, but change them. It became a sacred site, visited only in silence. Then, in 1878, a geologist named Charles Digby ignored the warnings. Drawn by tales of ancient power, Digby climbed the cliff alone, hoping to map and catalog the obsidian deposits. He returned days later, barefoot and raving. He claimed the rock had spoken to him in the voice of his dead mother. "It knows your name," he whispered before collapsing. He died 3 days later from exposure, though his body bore no wounds, just a perfect circle of frostbite around his mouth. Since then, strange tales have clung to Obsidian Cliff. Climbers report hearing voices not their own. Tourists have said the wind carries laughter or sobs. In 1943, a park naturalist recorded an interview with a woman who claimed she heard her husband's voice, even though he'd died in World War I. It said things he never told anyone, things he could never have shared. Skeptics argue it's a natural echo chamber, shaped by wind and rock. Yet those who've climbed the cliff say the voices don't bounce, they follow. One ranger reported hearing his own words repeated back to him in a voice that wasn't his. Another described hearing someone calling his name every time he turned his back to the cliff. He quit a week later and left the state. In modern times, Hikers are warned not to linger after dusk. The cliff is brittle and sharp, physically dangerous, but some believe the real threat is what you might hear in the silence. And if you're unlucky enough to listen too closely, the voices don't stop once you leave. They whisper in your sleep. They call you back. 7. The Curse of the Thermal Bride. She appears where the steam is thickest, dressed in white, her veil drifting like gauze over boiling pools. Some say she's a warning, others a memory that won't burn away. The legend of the Thermal Bride begins in the summer of a newlywed couple from Boston arrived in Yellowstone on their honeymoon. Staying at the Old Faithful Inn, they were last seen walking hand in hand toward the upper geyser basin. The next morning, only the groom returned, soaked, dazed and silent. When questioned, he simply muttered, "She wanted to see the stars from the steam." Her body was never found. Soon after, guests and rangers began seeing her, a woman in a wedding dress wandering alone, near Morning Glory Pool or the edge of Grand Prismatic Spring. At first she was silent, then the weeping began. Eyewitnesses across decades report similar scenes, the bride drifting through steam, her face pale and wet, her dress stained yellow like sulfur. In 1964, a park ranger followed her cries into the fog and stumbled into a hydrothermal runoff. He survived, but with burns that never fully healed. He later confessed, "It felt like she led me, like she needed someone else." Her appearances became more frequent after storms or earthquakes, when the earth shifted and geysers roared louder than usual. In 1987, a photo surfaced, showing a faint figure standing at the edge of a hot spring, arms outstretched, veil fluttering, but the boardwalk was closed and no one should have been there. Scientists suggest illusions caused by rising steam, fatigue, and the park's eerie acoustic. Yet her story has grown with each retelling. Some claim she wasn't just a bride but a woman escaping a violent past. Others say she sacrificed herself to calm the geothermal spirits below. Today, visitors leave white flowers near Morning Glory Pool, tucked into the safety railings. Rangers don't acknowledge it, but they don't remove them either. And if you hear soft sobbing while walking alone through the steam, don't look back. They say she's searching for someone to finish her honeymoon, someone to join her in the heat that never cools. 8. The Lantern Man of Lamar Valley. In the windswept reaches of Lamar Valley, where wolves roam, and the night sky swallows all but the stars, a lone light sometimes dances where no road or path leads. Locals call it the Lantern Man. The first reports date to the early 1900s, when railroad workers laying tracks on the park's northern rim claimed to see a flickering lantern moving across distant hills. One worker, Elmer Rausch, followed it one night, convinced it was another crewman lost in the dark. He never returned. His lunch tin and gloves were later found near a frozen pond, the ice unbroken, the surface untouched. Since then, the Lantern Man has become a fixture in local lore. Described as a tall figure in an old duster coat, his head always down, his left arm raised as if carrying an invisible flame. The light pulses orange, then green, then vanishes. Some say the lantern swings as though he's searching, but for what? No one knows. In 1931, a group of biologists tracking bison camped near Soda Butte Creek reported a light approaching their tent. They called out thinking it was a ranger. The light paused. Then, with no sound, it receded, faster than human legs could move. When they investigated, they found no tracks. The nearest ranger post was 12 miles away. Skeptics have blamed it on swamp gas, reflections from vehicle lights, or campers unaware of their surroundings. But Lamar is a remote valley, and when the light appears, it often does so in places where no roads or humans should be. Some say the Lantern Man is a remnant of an old ranger who died during a brutal blizzard, lost in the valley while trying to save others. Others whisper he's something older, a spirit trapped between worlds, wandering a place where the veil between life and death thins. Modern visitors still spot him from the ridgelines or across the valley floor, always at a distance, always flickering. Park radios occasionally catch strange interference in the area. Static broken by a voice whispering numbers, or a single word, "come." And when the lantern light swings toward you casting shadows where none should fall, the old warning comes to mind: don't follow it, or you may never come back. 9. The geyser that screams. Old Faithful may draw the crowds, but hidden deeper in the backcountry lies a geyser that few dare visit. Not because it's dangerous, but because it screams. Known unofficially among rangers as Widowmaker Geyser, the legend dates back to 1923, when a park geologist named Howard Ellison disappeared while mapping thermal anomalies west of Shoshone Lake. He had been documenting unusual venting patterns and believed he'd found a new geyser. His last entry read, "It sounds like a person calling for help." His body was never found, but his compass and notebook were discovered near a steaming vent surrounded by scorched animal bones and a twisted half-melted pair of boots. Since then, hikers have reported the same phenomenon, a high-pitched wail, rising from the earth at irregular intervals. Sometimes it sounds like wind, other times it sounds unmistakably human, a voice begging, crying, or warning. In 1978, a pair of backpackers fled the area after one claimed he heard his own name shouted from beneath his feet. Those brave enough to approach say the geyser itself is small, almost forgettable, a mossy ring of damp stone, but when it vents, the sound is unlike any other. One ranger described it as a baby crying in reverse, hollow, rising, unnatural. Another said he heard dozens of voices at once, like a choir trapped underground. Geothermal scientists who studied the area in the 1990s recorded the sounds and labeled them as subsonic seismic activity, a kind of natural harmonic caused by shifting steam pressure, but the audio file was never made public. Some believe it was destroyed, claiming the noises triggered hallucinations and intense nausea in the lab team who analyzed it. Park maps no longer list the geyser's location. Rangers avoid the topic when asked, but those who know the terrain speak quietly of the place where the ground screams back, a place not made for people, and if you do hear it, they say don't listen too closely. The longer you stand there, the more the screams begin to resemble someone you know. 10. The Shiver Elk of Mammoth Hot Springs. In the northern stretch of Yellowstone lies Mammoth Hot Springs, a surreal landscape of limestone terraces, steaming vents, and a silence that presses against your skin. But when winter descends and the world turns white, something unnatural walks among the elk herds. Something with too many eyes. The story began in the harsh winter of A park photographer named Helen Brasher was documenting elk migrations near Mammoth when she spotted an enormous bull towering, with antlers like twisted antimony, and fur that shimmered like ice under moonlight. Through her lens she saw something impossible. The elk had no eyes in its sockets, but they blinked from its ribs. Helen dropped her camera. Days later, she was found wandering the trails barefoot and frostbitten, muttering the same phrase over and over. "It's not cold, it's watching." The creature became known as the Shiver Elk. Over the years, other sightings followed, but always in deep winter. Park rangers found hoof prints that started and stopped mid-snowfield, with no trail leading in or out. Hunters reported seeing elk that moved without sound, their breath fogless even in sub-zero temperatures. One man swore the animal turned its head and every eye along its flank opened in unison. Skeptics blame hypothermia, snow blindness, and the disorienting patterns of geothermal steam, but veteran rangers know better. In 1973, one wrote anonymously in a park memo, "We lost a man last week. No blood, just his boots in the snow, pointed uphill, heard a call, not elk, not wolf, something else, something hollow." Local native legends speak of a spirit called Waksa, a winter guardian that takes the form of prey to lure predators into madness. The Shiver Elk, some believe, is not an animal but a punishment, A reminder that not everything that walks on four legs is meant to be hunted. Today, when snow blankets the terraces and the real elk wander low for warmth, few will walk the upper trails alone. And if you see an elk that doesn't steam, that doesn't flinch, and whose antlers seem to hum in the wind, don't look too long. It's already looking back. 11. The Mirror in the Cave. Near the northern rim of Yellowstone, beyond the travertine shelves and fossil-strewn ridges, lies a cavern few speak of and fewer can find. Carved into the hillside like a scar hidden by pine, this cave holds something older than stone. They call it the Mirror. The earliest written mention comes from an 1882 account by wilderness guide Samuel Deeks, who claimed he stumbled upon a cave while tracking a cougar. Inside he found a crystal-clear pool, still and black, yet somehow reflective even in darkness. He wrote, "It showed me myself, but not as I am, as I will be," and it smiled. He burned his journal a week later, or so claimed the trapper who found him raving in Mammoth Springs. In the decades that followed, whispers grew. Hunters went missing in the area. Rangers reported strange echo patterns that returned their voices slightly wrong, delayed deeper, or in another tone altogether. In 1935, a group of geology students found the cave again. Only two returned. They refused to speak of what they saw, but one later carved the words the eye remembers into his dormitory wall before disappearing. Those who've entered and returned described the same eerie sensation, a feeling of being watched from beneath the water, followed by sudden and overwhelming déjà vu. Some claim to have seen themselves in the pool, aged by decades or wearing clothes they've never owned. One hiker in 1989 wrote in her trail diary, "It smiled when I didn't. It wasn't me." Speculation abounds. Magnetic fields, underground gases, hallucinatory mold spores. But the cave's location has never been officially confirmed, and modern park officials deny its existence. Still, cryptic warnings are found etched into old park signs and tree bark. The mirror lies. Don't drink. It wants reflection. Some believe the mirror shows your truest self, or your worst. Others say it swaps places with you if you linger too long. And then there are those who simply vanish, their boots left just outside the mouth of the cave, pointed inward. If you ever find yourself deep in the backcountry and the trail grows silent, and you feel drawn toward a dark crevice in the stone, do not look into the water. You might not be the one who walks away. 12. The Lost Village beneath Yellowstone. Beneath the geysers, below the rivers and hot springs, something is buried, a village that never appears on maps, built by hands long gone. But on certain nights, when the moon is high and the ground trembles softly, some say you can still hear it, the sound of bells, faint music, and voices echoing from below. The legend of the Lost Village begins in 1869, when a group of prospectors vanished while crossing the Hayden Plateau. Weeks later, a single survivor stumbled into Fort Ellis, dehydrated and wild-eyed. He spoke of a stone village under the crust, with glowing walls, glass domes, and people who moved like shadows. He died before he could draw it. In 1922, a seismic expedition drilled near the mud volcano and discovered a network of unnatural cavities, geometric, and lined with an unknown mineral. The area was sealed and marked unstable. Official documents labeled the find as a collapsed magma chamber. But one of the geologists, Jonas Coyle, later published a private letter claiming, "They've built down there, not men. Something else." Sightings since then have followed a pattern. Strange lights beneath frozen lakes, vibrations in the ground that resemble machinery. Tourists, near Dragon's Mouth Spring, reporting distant singing, in a language no one can place. In 1983, a ranger investigating a thermal anomaly near Sulphur Cauldron recorded rhythmic drumming from beneath the earth, repeating every 7 seconds for 40 minutes, then stopping. Skeptics chalk it up to geothermal shifts or natural resonance, but tribal elders from the Crow and Shoshone, have older stories of an ancient people who were swallowed by the mountain, who chose to live below rather than leave when the world changed. They are not dead, the legend said, merely waiting. To this day, hikers have claimed to hear a low bell ringing when the fog settles thick and the ground pulses with heat. One woman described a melody that pulled her feet forward, only to wake hours later lying face down in sulfur-crusted soil, her boots scorched and her compass spinning. Park officials deny any buried settlement exists, but the ground in Yellowstone is never it shifts, swells, breathes, and sometimes whispers. And if the stories are true, then under those shifting stones lies a forgotten village that still watches and listens. If you enjoyed the video, please click the like button and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. See you in the next one.